for all. This is a huge deal. I know you all realize how long of a fight this has been and how close we are to actually getting some real policies in place that will directly impact and support the lives of so many here in Vermont. It is time. It is beyond time. And I could not be more pleased to be here with you all today and to share this opportunity for you to hear from some amazing folks in the field who are trying to get this across the finish line. What we want you to know, beyond anything, is that it's not just about the words that we're going to say today. We need actions to follow in place. We need you to help reach out to your elected officials and ensure that they know that you need paid leave for all. That this is something that we require in order to function as a society, as a state, and for us to continue to move, not just in economic prosperity, but in the kind of community care and support that we all deserve to have, whoever lives, works, or plays here in the Green Mountain State. So my name is Kiah Morris, and I am the Executive Director of Rights and Democracy, and I'm so thrilled to be able to be here, as I said, to share this conversation. So what we have here today is an incredible opportunity to honor more than 20 of the different advocacy groups, business associations, and community organizations that believe that working Vermonters and their families deserve to prioritize their health and their well-being without having to face financial crisis. That is a fundamental. We have some incredible bill sponsors that have helped push this forth, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what these bills look like and how they will impact different folks in different parts of our state. So I want to make sure that I do give a very special shout out and appreciation to choose the side of new parents who want to form essential, lasting bonds with their children, of family caregivers, usually women, who are stepping in to help their aging parents navigate serious illness or injury, with working Vermonters across the lifespan who need time to recover and heal from their own health crises. We want to be able to do so without the threat of financial ruin, and to work with employers across the state who willingly want to provide this benefit and who know that a universal program is the best way to ensure that we are going to receive those benefits and that those benefits will be there when we need it the most. And at some point in our lives, every single person in this room will need that level of care. So today we're going to hear from some amazing folks. We're going to hear from Cary Brown from the Vermont Commission on Women. We're going to hear from Representative Emilie Kornheiser as one of the bill sponsors of H66. We're going to hear from Pamela Smith out of Middlebury, Vermont. We're going to hear from Senator Kesha Hinsdale of Shelburne. We're going to hear from Amanda Saladino of Cary. We're going to also hear from some business owners as well who are in this fight. So I want to welcome you to this conversation. And Cary, will you please help us set the stage?
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming here. We have some cause for celebration because 30 years ago this month, Congress passed the FaMLI and Medical Leave Act. So this was the first time that people were guaranteed to be able to take unpaid time off from work to care for themselves and to care for their loved ones. Since then, it's estimated that it's been used 463 million times. Wow. Every year, 15 million people take leave under FaMLI. They use it to care for their family members, they use it to recover from their own serious injuries and illnesses, and they use it to take care of other folks' medical needs. Millions of people who otherwise would have had to leave their jobs have been able to keep them because under FaMLI, the job is protected for you while you take time off from work. But possibly the most powerful thing that FaMLI did was to recognize that caregiving is absolutely essential to our economy and to our whole society. If nobody is taking care of the children, if nobody is taking care of people who are ill, if nobody's taking care of aging relatives, then absolutely everything falls apart without that. The COVID pandemic brought that into really laser focus, and it also shone a very bright light on the fact that women are doing most of this work. In the COVID pandemic, 4 times as many women as men just left the workforce altogether. So even in non-pandemic times, Women spend more time taking children to the doctor, more time staying home with people when they're sick to take care of them, more time caring for elderly relatives. About 25%, a quarter of women aged 45 to 64 are providing care for an elderly relative. And they're losing time and wages at work in order to be able to do so. So this reliance on women to do more than their share has profound effects on their economic well-being. In Vermont, this means that women are more likely to work part-time. 21% of women in Vermont work part-time compared to just 9% of men. It also means that women are a disproportionate share of Vermonters living in poverty, and they're much more likely to earn the minimum wage, or in some cases even less. FMLA provides unpaid time off, but many families are just unable to afford losing wages to stay home to care for themselves or their families. A paid family and medical leave insurance program would increase the number of people taking caregiving leaves. It would increase women's likelihood of returning to their same employer after they took a leave. And it would encourage more men to take leave as well. So when caregiving responsibilities are shared by all genders, and when employees are able to care for their families and keep their wages, we are all stronger. So thank you for being here today to hear more about this, and I'm going to turn it over to one of the bill's sponsors, Representative Emilie Kornheiser.
Good afternoon. I'm Emilie Kornheiser, State Representative from Brattleboro and Chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm standing here today on this auspicious anniversary in the wake of a catastrophic pandemic because we want to ensure that Vermonters can make it work. That Vermonters can care for themselves and their loved ones. Care for their parents, their partners, their children, to bond, to care for folks who are deploying or need safe leave from work. With H66, the Family Medical Leave Insurance Bill, currently in the House, we want to ensure that we have a program that isn't only available to folks who can afford to take a pay cut, but also for folks who are just getting by right now, the majority of Vermonters. So we're hoping to cover full wages up to a living wage here. We're going to make sure that all working Vermonters can be covered, regardless of an employer's individual capacity, so that we don't leave businesses behind. We've made some important strides in the wake of the pandemic in improving families' well-being, with last year's passage of the child tax credit, with an expansion of the earned income tax credit and investments in housing and so many other things last biennium. But we can fulfill a promise this year to Vermonters with the passage of universal family and medical leave insurance and affordable, accessible childcare. Because we know that when caregivers, wherever they are in their life, whatever the age they are, we know that when they're supported and our basic needs are met, we're much stronger as a state. We know that all Vermonters, each one of us in this room, will need to take some time in our lives to recover from an illness or an injury, to bond with a new child, or to care for a loved one at some point. And I've had many joking conversations with so many people in this room about the sandwich generation and how many of us who are working on this are right now still stuck between caring for parents, caring for partners, and caring for our children. 65% of Vermonters don't have access to paid family and medical leave. I wait tables on weekends, and I have so many stories to tell about myself and my coworkers there and our experiences with coming to work or with not making enough. This includes a disproportionate share of low-wage workers, Black and brown workers, women, parents. These workers, like my colleagues at the restaurant, are forced to either come to work sick or injured, or delay or cancel necessary care, forgo critical time with parents or children, or to take the kind of unpaid leave that we saw jeopardizes folks' financial security, ability to stay in their homes, and ability to make it work. We must do better, and this biennium, we know that we can do better. We know that the strength of our community, Vermonters know this particularly, that our families and communities are connected, and we learned that so powerfully the last few years. I want us to put the lessons of the pandemic and other folks' experience with paid leave to the work of Vermonters to create a more resilient Vermont than we've seen. On this anniversary of the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, I'm going to spend a few minutes describing what a strong, equitable program of leave will look like, such as that in age 66. Family medical leave insurance, for those who have not been familiar with it, perhaps they've never received it, it's a program that allows people to take time off to work, to care for themselves, to care for loved ones, to welcome a new child, for adoption or foster placement, to recover from your own illness or injury, and to not face a loss of hardship from income. It's an inclusive program that we have here, which covers military families, deployment needs. It covers safe time for people impacted by intimate partner violence. It means that all workers are covered. Self-employed workers, part-time workers, full-time workers, seasonal workers. It is comprehensive coverage, 12 weeks of leave, without gender distinction, because we know that this is one of the proven ways of closing pay gaps, regardless of gender or race. It is adequate wage replacement. This is near and dear to my heart. It's high enough to ensure that all workers can afford to take the leave, including low-income workers, who we know turn their entire income over to their bills every month. We want to make sure that when we create a program, folks can actually use that program, that it's designed to meet people's day-to-day needs. So in age 66, we're looking at 100% wage replacement level for workers, making at or less than the average weekly wage in Vermont. We're paying for this program with insurance premiums paid by all workers, while exempting the pay of our lowest wage workers, who will still remain covered by the insurance program. As we know that privatization of public goods and services has been shown to worsen inequities in our communities, this strong paid leave program is going to be administered by the state, by the Treasury Department, so that it can be accountable to Vermonters, as all strong programs are. And fortunately, the extra time that we've had with this bill, thanks to the governor's unfortunate veto a few years ago, means that we could have learned from other states and developed more inclusive family definitions to meet the needs of today's families, to understand and reflect how our community lives and works. And we've put in place clearer job protections to, again, build on the legacy of our Family Medical Leave Act. I'm really proud to stand here today on behalf of all the Vermonters who are living this reality with me every day. We know that the health and resilience of our families and communities are integrally connected. Last year, we put those values into action, and we can build on those values. We're ready to build on this commitment by enacting this legislation that strengthens our capacity for care. Because we know that when caregivers are supported and people's basic needs are met, we are stronger as a state. As lawmakers, standing behind me, standing in front of me, in other committee rooms all over this building, we have the power and we have the ability, and most importantly, the responsibility to make this happen this year. Thank you. And next we're going to hear from Pamela Smith.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Smith from Middlebury, Vermont. I was diagnosed 3 years ago with younger onset Alzheimer's and was struggling with memory failure for 2 years prior to my diagnosis. I no longer drive or cook. My memory continues to decline along with other skills like problem solving. I'm on Social Security disability since I'm no longer able to work. So you may be wondering why paid family medical leave is so important to me. Here's one reason based on a recent event. I attended a medical appointment at the pain intervention clinic. I met with a doctor and I believe he reviewed some options after giving me an exam. When the appointment was over, I remembered nothing about what was said during the appointment. I reviewed the medical notes that the doctor wrote, which I discovered was written more to meet UVMMC's record-keeping needs. And so they did not provide me useful information about our conversations. He stated that I asked and he answered questions, but there was no content. With paid family and medical leave, I could have had my daughter or husband with me, taking notes so that I would know what was said and what I was expected to do for follow-up care. I didn't ask one of them to come with me because neither can afford to take unpaid days off. And I feel even more of a burden when I ask them to use one of their limited paid days off, given that they have other responsibilities and needs. My needs are only going to increase. I already feel like a burden to my family, though they are wonderful and strive to make me feel comfortable. I've come to believe that Alzheimer's is much harder on the family than it is on the afflicted person. But having paid family and medical leave would make our lives a bit easier, and every bit helps. I'm calling on the legislature to act with urgency. With the urgency this issue demands, and to pass a strong paid leave bill this year. I'd like to point out, my daughter is one of those sandwich families. She has 2 young children, and then there's me. I was also asked to explain my little flower party here. So these are based on the colors from the Alzheimer's Association. My blue flower indicates that I have Alzheimer's. The 2 purple flowers represent my 2 grandfathers that died from Alzheimer's, one of which I had to use unpaid family leave many times to support. And the bottom is that I was a primary caregiver to my grandfather and also to my uncle who developed dementia in his last years. And I was able to stay with him because I had Alzheimer's and couldn't work anymore through to the end. So that's what these symbolize.
It's wonderful to be here with our House counterparts and Senator Riccardi and Lieutenant Governor Dave Zuckerman representing the Senate side. I didn't want to interrupt our Senate Democratic caucus, but there would be others here, and our companion paid family leave bill dropped today in the Senate, probably with its most robust sponsor list ever. And so I want to thank Senator Hardy and others for championing this issue for so long alongside our House colleagues. I'm standing a little bit away from the podium because there's one voice that I'm going to try to speak for a little bit, who's in the room with us. I just entered my 3rd trimester this week, and she always kicks around lunch anyway, but I'd like to think she's raising a little fist for this bill as well. It seems a little bit self-serving, but I've been sponsoring this bill for 14 years. I didn't think that it would take this long, but here we are, and that's the position that so many of us are in. This issue of paid family and medical leave has fallen off the agenda time and time again because it's a voice for some of the most voiceless, those who deserve to have their start in life be with their parents and their family, and those who are struggling and exhausted and don't always have the time to reach out to their legislator and speak up on an issue that we know can put a family in poverty just as they're starting to grow, starting to grow a family. And so, there's just a few things I wanted to say. I mean, one is very personal. Many of you have been through creating life and bringing it into this world, and you read all these books that tell you, stay home, take care of this sacred journey, this sacred passage to parenthood, to motherhood. That not only helps you bond with your baby, that helps you physically heal, and it also helps you mentally process what you're going through. Just keeping depression at bay, knowing that you have time to really enjoy and create ritual around something that most other cultures and developed nations know to be so sacred that they give months, if not years, of family leave to parents. And we are so far behind on this, and we have been for far too long. And the other two things I'd like to add, just as the chair of economic development, are one, and a member of Senate Finance, I should say, are that, we are also looking at the cost of allowing infants to stay with their parents against the cost of having to give your infant to a stranger, essentially. We have loving early learning centers, loving early childhood educators, but that's a really young age, 8, 12 weeks, to give your baby over to someone else. And it's also very expensive. In most cases, it's more expensive to pay for a week of someone else watching your very young baby than it is to be able to stay home with your very young baby and know that you are getting compensated so you don't have to make those extremely difficult choices. And finally, just to broaden out, to the entire bill, it's not just about me and my baby. This is about all kinds of situations that people find themselves in. This is about basic humanity. For almost all of us, if we didn't have this kind of support, this kind of leave, we remember that as a really painful part of a time that we lost somebody, a time that we were struggling with juggling all of those different care scenarios, helping a parent, helping a loved one, taking care of ourselves, taking care of children. And so one of the critiques that's come up around this bill is we have a workforce crisis, and this bill could take people out of the workforce. And I'm here to argue, as the chair of economic development, that it doesn't take people out of the workforce, it takes them out of work temporarily so that they can return to the workforce. And what we're seeing is there is a permanent dropping out of people from the workforce because they don't feel treated humanely. They can't make it all work. They slip into poverty, and it's actually more expedient, sadly, to stay there than to try to climb their way back up when they lose this kind of income and they lose this kind of support. And so what we're seeing now is people in despair that are dropping out of the workforce entirely. And that's a really different thing that this bill can help, is that someone is saying, I am gonna help you get through this so you can come back, so that you can work again. And you're valuable to me, your humanity is valuable to me, what you're going through is valuable to me, and I'm gonna make sure you can get back into the workforce. So, I see this as completely complementary to so much of the other work we're doing, and I see this as exactly what people have been talking about since we got into this pandemic, that our inhumanity was showing before, and it's been showing in such stark relief since this pandemic began, and since we tried to take a step back and say, what is best for our families, what is best for society? And this bill finally puts us back on track to that humanity and that well-being for all Vermonters. My due date is May 10th. I've waited 14 years to pass this bill. I really hope, together with the House, we can get this done before the session ends. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hold on, let me bring up my speech here. My name is Saladino, and I am from Barry, and I know that Vermont needs a universal paid and medical leave program. Like, I personally know. Before I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, My husband and I both worked full-time jobs, made decent pay, had great benefits. We had saved up over $7,000 in our savings account. Along with just paying our regular bills, we were able to save. And we just bought our first home. We had very little to no credit card debt. We could afford a child, so we did. We had a child. However, in December of 2020, I just entered the second trimester of my pregnancy when we got the devastating news that my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And in June of 2021, my daughter was born. I received short-term disability through my employer, but it wasn't enough to cover our daily expenses. We didn't have childcare set up. And when I finally found a place, it was so expensive that I knew if I was working, it wouldn't even cover the costs. It was worth it more for me to stay home with my daughter than to go back to work. We were then living on one income. And in September of 2021, my husband then had aggressive high-risk surgery to remove cancer from his liver, and he was out of work for 3 months. He did not have short-term disability through his employer. And now we had no income. Medical bills were racking up. We pulled money from savings to pay for our mortgage and our other utility bills. Credit cards were used for groceries and gas. My daughter is just under 2 years old now, and my husband is in remission and he's back to work. I take care of my daughter full-time during the day. She's actually at home napping with my mom watching her. And I work part-time. I work evenings and weekends. I work late nights, so we can afford to try and financially recover from over $12,000 in credit card debt. If we had adequate paid leave when I gave birth, I would have felt more confident and not rushed in finding childcare. I would have gone back to work sooner. If we had access to paid leave after my husband's surgery, we wouldn't have drained our savings and racked up so much debt. You tell people, prepare for the just in cases, the rainy day funds, but there are some things that you just cannot prepare for. We did everything right. According to, everyone, we had the savings, we had the jobs, we had we had our first house, but we were absolutely blindsided and took a major financial hit from everything that happened. What happened in my family is the exact reason why Vermonters need a universal paid family medical leave program. Thank you so much.
Now asking Randy George from Redhead Bakery. Randy with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy George from Red Hen Baking Company, just down the road here. We have about 60 employees, and we've been in business for a little over 23 years. And these stories that we've just been hearing are so compelling. And I could probably have a long line of current and former employees coming up and telling similar stories. It's been a goal of ours ever since we've been in business to do more than go above and beyond as much as we can what your average service industry business can provide. But that's a real stretch in a lot of ways. Our full-time employees have health. We cover most of the cost of their health insurance. We cover disability insurance. They have paid time off. But missing from that list is paid family leave. And as I say, I have all kinds of stories from people fighting cancer to taking care of elderly parents to many employees who've had children while working for us. These stories in the past, and they're also in the present. I could tell you stories about people who are taking care of elderly parents right today. And they're faced with a problem where the challenge of trying to juggle taking care of their parents and keeping an income going. So I'm not apologetic about the fact that in our business, with cash flow as it is, with margins as they perpetually are in the food industry business, that we're not able to afford to pay for an employee to be away for 12 weeks and pay their wages that entire time and pay their replacement. So we've seen it, as everybody's been saying, the COVID pandemic has really brought this into focus, the need for this kind of thing. And you can talk to any restaurateur in the state, and they'll tell you about the challenges that we've all had with finding labor in the last few years. And there are lots of reasons for this, but I really think that a big one is the fact that people start to think, what am I going to do when faced with a situation where I won't be able to work? And there are, thankfully, and hats off to them, a whole lot of businesses in this state that are able to afford it and do so for their employees. There are also a whole lot, and we've been hearing from people who work for those businesses just now, a whole lot of businesses who can't afford this. So the reason that I'm up here as a business owner is because I feel that this is an incredibly pro-business bill. This is one that's going to put us all on a level playing field. People won't. This will be crossed off the list of concerns if they're considering a job with us, or any other business similar to ours that is not able to afford this kind of benefit. So, in that way, I think that one of the exciting things about this bill is that it will go a long way towards addressing income inequality in this state. We've heard about these kinds of issues affecting women, low-wage earners, much more than the rest of the population. And so I'm somebody who likes to think that we're not employing a lot of low-wage earners, but we all know, I know, my employees know, that there are a lot of other businesses out there that do pay them perhaps better and also have this kind of benefit. So we all need to share in this. So thank you very much.
Lindsey.
Hello, I'm Lindsey DesLauriers with Bolton Valley Resort. We employ right now in the winter about 450 or so people, many of them part-time and many of them seasonal because we're a ski area. And one of the things that I really like about this bill, in addition to everything that everybody has said about, sort of the universality of need, that because it's so, it offers so much coverage, pretty much everyone's going to need it at some point. One of the things I really like about it as a business owner and as somebody in hospitality with seasonal employment is that it's not tied to the individual employer. Randy talked about not being able to provide family leave, and many businesses, Bolton Valley included, can't afford to do that individually. But in addition, many seasonal workers who choose that lifestyle for a variety of reasons tend to be disconnected from the benefits that their employer does offer. And so disconnecting this particular benefit from the individual employer just means that if you're seasonal, you're going to have access to it. It means that if you just got a new job, you can't time your illness or your parents' illness. It means that you're going to have access to it. And so, I think that that's one of the things that makes this bill and the way it's structured particularly valuable. Kesha mentioned the labor market. And she mentioned that people are nervous maybe about people leaving the labor market to have this care. And I can just tell you as an employer that people do leave it. They just leave it unpaid and maybe they don't come back. But in addition, right now, even before the pandemic, but also now especially, unemployment is so low. And that's great for workers, but it really is a challenge for employers. And we are truly struggling to find people to do the jobs that we need done to keep our businesses open. And at Bolton Valley, for example, we're struggling to be open the hours that we would like to be open to offer the services that we want to offer because we're so constrained on staff. And I know that we're not alone. You know, you see how many restaurants are open 5 days a week right now? How many restaurants are closed? So, you know, for me, I think that anything Vermont can do right now to attract workers to our state would be a smart move. So Bolton Valley is happy to contribute our fair share to make this happen, not just for our employees, but for all Vermont workers. Thanks.
Lindsey, Rebecca White.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Joy Henrietta White. I'm addressing you today as a proud Bradford, Vermont resident and on behalf of my employer, the Hanover Co-op, a business deeply invested in Vermont and dedicated to its business relationships with Vermont's small farms and food producers. At its core, this legislation is focused on keeping people and communities whole. It prevents the fracture that families experience when they face the impossible decision of caring for a dying parent or taking home a paycheck. Workers and employees will benefit from increased workforce retention, bolstered by access to these paid leaves. Let's keep people and communities whole. Vermont's economy will be intentionally inclusive and diverse. This legislation will also help small businesses and entrepreneurs shape our communities. Every day, they seek to provide meaningful career opportunities and benefits for our emerging graduate workforce. Every working Vermonter should have access to these programs. Whether they work at the country store, a farm, Red Hen Bakery, or the local hospital, we have the ability and the responsibility to act on paid family and medical leave to serve not just some, but all Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was such a key conversation. We've heard from folks who are dealing with this currently as a part of their lived reality, whether or not they're going to be able to maintain the employment that they deserve to be able to have the type of life that they deserve to be able to have the dignity of caring for those that they care about, including themselves. This is something that we need to make happen here and today, and I could not be more proud of the folks that are here in Coalition. I'd like to open it up now if there's any questions from press or anyone here.
I know I came in a little late, so I might have missed this. And I know you answered this in context, so I'm going to ask it explicitly. I mean, the governor was just over there saying, yeah, everyone has these great ideas, but we can't afford another tax. I mean, what do you say to that?
Check to see if anyone else wants to answer that question. You know, when I've penciled out the numbers for this, when I think about how much it would cost Red Hen as an employer, or an individual who is paying in on their paycheck, we're talking about $200 a year per person, and the payout in terms of the medical leave coverage is thousands. That's what happens when we invest collectively in something, when we all buy in. It means that a small piece from each of us, from employers and from employees, means that each of us can actually have our needs met long term when we actually need it.
It's a huge investment in people and a huge return on that investment.
Hi all, I'm Michelle Fay with Voices for Vermont's Children, and I just want to point out that these costs are being borne right now, but they're being borne in unequitable, haphazard ways. And what we're proposing to do is to spread that across in a social insurance program so everyone benefits.
Could employers opt out of this program if they already have benefits from a private insurer?
The bill as introduced in the House, if an employer has equal, comparable, or better benefits, they could opt out.
And so how would this square with the proposal from the administration that the family leave, voluntary family leave program they started talking about a few months ago? If this were to pass, how would the two go together?
Under this program, all Vermonters can get their needs met, not just those who can afford it.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending, and